environment would get him in a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, I had divorced his father, and I was doing the single parent thing again. And so once we got to Virginia, it wasn't long before things started to fall apart again. In 6th grade, he got expelled from the school system, and I ended up putting him in the next county school system. And while he was in there, he got suspended and expelled, and it just continued in a cycle. And I couldn't understand why. I couldn't understand what. I kept moving him in different locations, thinking that maybe a fresh start is what he needs. That's all he needs is a fresh start. If he gets a fresh start, he'll be a better kid. I know he needs a fresh start. Well, all I did was just move him out of one bad situation into another. And so when we moved into this little area called Manassas Park, he came home one day and he said, "Mom, I met this girl, and she said her daddy is the pastor of this church." He said, "Can we go to that church?" I said, "Well, let me go first," because I wanted to see what was there, what kind of fruit they were selling. And I wanted to know that it would be somewhere or something that would inspire him or help him to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I went one Sunday, and afterwards I came back. I told him, I said, "Yeah, that's where we'll go." And because when I left North Carolina, my pastor there had sent me to the sister church of the church we attended. But because this one was even closer, and the ministry from just the one visit that I went to was awesome, I told him, "Yeah, we'll go." And I was so hoping that he would get embedded in the ministry and really focus on what God was trying to do in his life. Now, I think by that time he may have been 12, maybe 13. I'm not sure. But he did get into the church, and he did a few things, but he did more in the community than he did in the church, in which his community activities got him, again, locked up. By the time he got to high school, he was skipping school, getting high, and at some point he got involved with the gang. And I remember we would have arguments when I was taking shots for school. He would tell me, "I'm not going to wear anything but black and blue." And I was like, well, I'm not going to pay for just black and blue. And I remember one day we went to JCPenney, and I was telling him what he was going to get and showing him stuff. And he was like, "I'm not going to wear it if it's not black and blue." Well, we walked out of JCPenney because I figured, I'm even going to just pay for black and blue, not knowing those colors were significant. So, over time, his activities became more and more involved to where I came home one afternoon, and there was a gang enforcement team. They had busted my door open with a big giant something, and they were searching my house. My daughter called me screaming and crying about people trying to get in the house, and by the time I got home, she was next door to the neighbor, but she was petrified because these people had ransacked our house. And the main thing they asked me when I walked in is, "Where's your son?" Well, at that time, I had no idea where he was at. And so I'm like, "Well, why are you looking for him?" Because we have a warrant out for his arrest for this or that. I'm like, "Are you serious?" I said, "Well, I don't know where he is." And so after that happened, I did contact him, and I said, "You can't come home." And I explained to him what was going on, and for I know 6 weeks or more, he ran. He was staying at other places, and the police would come to my house at all times of the night, knocking on the door. "We need to search your home." "Oh, okay." And I would, let them come in. They'd look for him, and then they'd leave. And during that time, I was telling him, "You need to turn yourself in. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I said, okay, you need to turn yourself in, okay, because this is getting to be, you need to go ahead and face this and get it over with and let it be done. Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And he didn't. He wouldn't. And at one point, so one time he came home. I don't know what happened, where he was hiding out, but it was evident that they were getting ready to come to those people's houses. And I told him, I said, you need to call and tell them that you're here and let them come and get you. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And as much as it hurt my heart, I knew he wasn't, and I didn't want him to run anymore. I wanted him to face whatever he had to face and get it over with. So I did. One of the hardest things I could have ever done was that I called, and I told him he was home.
Mm-hmm.
I was hurt, but I knew, and because I felt like, okay, he's going to kind of get a slap on the wrist, because that's all they've been doing. So they're going to slap him on the wrist and let him go. I had no idea what was coming next. Well, that started a series of court appearances and juvenile detention visits. And, you know, I would go and visit him. And, Frank, every time I would sit with him, I remember God telling me, call him by his name. And I would sit with him and I would say, man of God, this is not for you. I told him, the last time I waited for somebody to bring you to me, you were in the hospital. I just had you. And for me to have to sit and wait 10 or 15 minutes for them to bring me my son was one of the hardest things that I could have ever done. And so many times I just wish that I could have just grabbed his hand and said, okay, let's go. But to know that he was in a place that I no longer had any control over any part of his being. He had no control over any part of his being. And that everything he did was orchestrated by man. He couldn't do anything. And so at one point I prayed and I said, God, I said, you've got him in a place now where he can only, where he has to hear your voice. Speak to him. And throughout the time that he was in, the juvenile detention program in Manassas, I got to visit him every Sunday or every other Sunday. I don't remember how it went, but I would see him quite often. I don't know if you remember, I would leave church early because I had to be there at a certain time. And then after he kept going before this judge and she kept setting stipulations, he ended up being sent to Richmond again. And that is the state detention program. And once he got to Richmond, he was there for, 9 months. And during that time, God had an angel sitting right there waiting on us by the name of, I better not call her name, but there was a guard there that one Sunday I went to visit him, and I was wearing some type of perfume, and I forgot what it was, and she smelled it. She said, oh, my God, that smells so good. I said, really? She said, yeah. She said, what is it? And I told her where I got it from. She said, oh, I can't even afford to shop there. I said, okay. I said, well, I work there. So, you know, I hooked her up with a whole package of it, right? Yeah. And I left it for her one day. Didn't tell anybody what it was. It was just in a brown paper bag. I had wrapped it up. So after that, she called me and she thanked me for it and said, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. I said, as a matter of fact, I need eyes and ears in there with my son. She said, I got you. And Frank, when I say, she said she got me, she had me. I knew stuff that went on in there that had happened before Brian could tell me. I knew when he wouldn't be able to call me. And when he couldn't call me, I would call up there and I would say, "May I speak to my son?" Well, they just had a riot. Well, why wasn't I informed? Well, no, I'm supposed to know these things, especially if he gets injured. Why wasn't I informed? Well, I'll be there tomorrow to see him. Well, he can't have visitors. Well, I'm still coming. And then I would call the superintendent, because she would give me the process. Call the superintendent. Let him know this is what you're going to do. Let him know how. And so when I say eyes and ears, there was someone watching over him at all turns, at all points. As it was getting closer for him to leave, those boys have a tendency, or what they do is they pick a fight. Or they do something to the person getting ready to leave so that they can set their time back. So 3 days prior to him leaving, a boy jumped on Brian. They ended up having to take him to the hospital, and I think that's why I was told. So as a part of why that they told me that he was going to take him to the hospital,